hearing screaming coming from their house. Nicholas skipped school more than he went, and when he was at school, he was usually in trouble or causing trouble. He was young, but he already had a criminal record from threatening his teachers, stealing a pair of shoes, breaking and entering into a convenience store. He even managed to get 3 very illegal tattoos given to him from friends with an unsterilized needle. He had the letter J on his left shoulder, the letter T on his left hand, and the letters L and N on his outer left ankle. Now, I couldn't find out what these letters signified in Nicholas's life, but they must have been important because I bet that really hurt. At some point prior to Nicholas's disappearance, his mother asked his older brother Jason to move back in with them and to try to help control the craziness that had become Nicholas's life. This apparently did not help. This caused more issues since Jason had a drug addiction and a pretty violent temper. On June 13th, 1994, Nicholas was last seen playing basketball in his neighborhood with his friends. He called home for a ride, but his mother was sleeping. She worked late night hours at the local Dunkin' Donuts, and his brother Jason said that he was not going to wake her up, that Nicholas could walk home. Nicholas never made it home that day, and with his bad reputation in everyone's mind, even the authorities initially believed that he left home of his own accord. He had run away a number of times, but never for more than just like a day. He also had a court hearing that was scheduled for the very next day. It was a pretty important one. It was to determine whether he was to stay at home with his family or be sent to a rehabilitative group home for his crimes. He reportedly did not like the idea of losing the freedom that he had while living at home. Authorities thought he was scared and running away from the law again, so they were very slow to respond in his disappearance. After he did not return home for more than a day, not even to get anything that he had, and reportedly he only had about $5 in his pocket, his family started to worry. Can you imagine your child has run away or disappeared so many times that you don't worry until they're gone for more than a day, and he's like 13. Might have been 14. No, 13. Despite opening a missing persons investigation, the police were not sure how to pursue Nicholas. He didn't have credit cards. He didn't have a cell phone. He didn't have a vehicle. He seemed pretty untraceable. Now it's 1994, so cell phones weren't really a thing, but whether he stayed in town or hitchhiked out, Nicholas would prove to be pretty difficult to track down on prior occasions. When it was clear that he wasn't coming home, the investigation finally took off. Police assumed that it would be easy to spot Nicholas in a large crowd because he was last seen wearing purple pants, and he searched the neighborhood, of course, but they found no sign of Nicholas, no sign that he had been camped out somewhere, and they believe that Jason may have made the whole thing up. The question that left the police really puzzled was, why? Why would he lie about something like that? As time went on, investigators really kind of slowed down, and his family started to believe that they would never see Nicholas again. However, in October of 1997, 3 years after Nicholas vanished, police in San Antonio received a call they never thought they would receive. A man that worked in a youth care center in Spain believed that Nicholas Barclay was there in their care, and that he was alive and perfectly healthy. The explanation was that he had been kidnapped and taken into a child, I'm going to take Letty's advice on this and say SEX ring operation run by high-ranking European military officials, but that he had somehow managed to escape. Police explained that Nicholas had been severely abused for the past 3 years, that he was subjected to experiments, and that he was forced to speak only French. As soon as the police called the family, his sister Kari immediately jumped on a plane and flew to Spain to identify him. Shocked and nervous when his sister arrived, Nicholas refused to leave the room. He feared that she would not recognize him and that he would be made to stay in Spain. However, when she saw him with a baseball cap and sunglasses on, his sister Kari still identified him as her little brother. For over an hour, Kari and Nicholas sat together looking through old family photos. She was trying to get some kind of emotional response from him, as she was told that Nicholas had lost all memory of his earlier life. As time went on, it seemed like his memory could potentially be returning, with Nicholas asking the question if Grandpa was still an a-hole. Now, despite Nicholas knowing certain things, he was extremely quiet. His sister was not fazed by this apparently, and assumed that it was because of the years of torture that he had endured. The final step before Nicholas could return to his family was to make sure that he was really who he said he was. Police arranged family photos that he'd never seen before, but taken of people that he knew, and he had to identify who these people were. Nicholas only made one small mistake. I didn't find out how many pictures there were, but he then was put on a flight back home with his sister Kari to reunite and reconnect with his family. They welcomed him back with open arms and an open home. They had kept his room just as he'd left it, and they had been anxiously awaiting his return. They missed him so much that they didn't notice some glaring inconsistencies between was a dark-haired boy with brown eyes. He was eerily calm, so calm that he made the other people around him uneasy. Nicholas said that the people behind the ring had conducted experiments on him and chemically changed his eye color and dyed his hair to make him unrecognizable to those that knew him. Despite the fact that he neither looked nor acted like their son, the Barclay family insisted, without a doubt, this boy was their son, Nicholas Barclay. They were just happy to have their son home and back and alive, and they believed him. But authorities were not so trusting. Questions started circling all around the neighborhood. How could he have gotten to Spain without a passport? Is it possible to chemically change your eye color? Why is his accent different? But the Barclay family closed their ears and continued to try to make their son comfortable. Investigators and distant family members still really had a hard time believing this crazy story. After hearing the account of Nicholas Barclay's ordeal, a private investigator named Charlie Parker, became suspicious and kind of took it upon himself to start to investigate. The hair color, fine, okay, they dyed your hair, but it's gonna grow, so we'll see if it's different. The eye claims were suspicious. It was unlikely that kidnappers would go so far as to alter his eye color, even if it was possible. Mr. Parker was also put off by the difference in personality. Though such a traumatic circumstance could possibly result in more subdued demeanor and the victim withdrawing into themselves. Mr. Parker was also put off by the differences in Nicholas's personality. Though, such a traumatic circumstance could result in more subdued demeanor and the victim withdrawing within to themselves. But Charlie Parker felt like it was more than that. He didn't seem withdrawn, Nicholas. He seemed more mature. In fact, he seemed older than his reported 16 years. Charlie Parker was struck by the dissimilarities between Nicholas and this person now presenting himself as the long-lost boy. He asked a camera operator to zoom in on the man's ears in an interview. He remembered something about Scotland Yard using that method to trace the man who had killed Martin Luther King, which I did not know about, and I did not know you could do that. To Charlie Parker's surprise, he was right. Nicholas Barclay was not, in fact, 16 as he claimed to be. He was 23, and he was not, in fact, Nicholas Barclay at all. He was a man named Frederick Pierre Bourdin, a 23-year-old French citizen and a notorious con artist. He had been wanted by Interpol for years. He had up to 500 different identities, and he blamed it on being raised without love or affection. When Frederick had heard the story of the distraught American family looking for their missing son, he had easily slipped into the persona of Nicholas Barclay. He got the idea when a Spanish police officer told him that he looked like Nicholas. He was able to keep this charade up for 3.5 months. He fooled these Spanish authorities, the FBI, and the Barclay family themselves, which to me is crazy. After the investigator discovered that they were two different people, the Barclay family still insisted that this was Nicholas, and they tried to keep him as their own. This completely baffled investigators and me. Why would they want a stranger pretending to be their son in their home? Was this some kind of coping mechanism, or was it something else? And still, where is Nicholas, the real Nicholas? Frederick was just as baffled as everyone else when it came to the Barclay family still believing that he was Nicholas, even after the news spread that he was an imposter. The family was wholeheartedly convinced that he was Nicholas, and there was nothing that anyone could do about it. Frederick claimed that when he returned home, the only person that he had yet to meet was his brother, Jason. He said that everyone else gave him endless hugs and seemed to be really convinced that he was who he said he was, except Jason. Frederick said when he came to see me, he didn't look at me like Nicholas. He didn't pretend to look at me like Nicholas. He said, "Good luck," and he left. Investigators claimed that their view on the family shifted from grieving to suspicious. How does a family not know who their own son is? And there was no one in their right mind who could consciously and knowingly let a complete stranger into their home, unless there was something that they knew that police didn't. This next part really kind of surprised me, and my mind did not go this way, but as I investigated, people's did. Frederick said they knew I was not Nicholas. They didn't believe a word that I said, but they were very good at not showing it. I remember in Spain, Kari did everything for me. When I didn't know something, she told me. "That's the house we used to live in. That's my daughter, your niece." She couldn't say that I wasn't her brother. Did she believe it or not? If you ask me, no. She did not believe for a second that I was her brother. She just decided I was going to be her brother. As investigators continued to watch the family, they noticed a phone call that Jason made in September of 1994 that was not too uncommon. Police explained that it is a tactic to convince the police that someone may still be alive. They're talking about the phone call that he made that his brother was breaking into the garage. They believe that he was trying to make the police believe that Nicholas was still alive. Frederick says they killed him. Some of them did it, some of them knew about it, and some of them chose to ignore it. He was constantly worried that Nicholas would come home and his cover would be blown. But after spending days with the Barclay family, he realized he didn't have to worry about that anymore. Before any large steps could be taken in the investigation into these claims, Jason was found dead from a drug overdose, which some people believed was intentional on his part. The case grew cold. Their prime suspect was dead, and there was not enough evidence to bring this case to court. It was suspected that foul play was involved, but to this day, we don't know the full story of what happened to Nicholas, and we will probably never find out. Frederick Borden did his time for this terrible crime, and he spent 6 years in prison. He apparently didn't learn anything though, because after his release, he continued to steal other people's identities, and he was in and out of prison for several years before finally settling down, getting married, and having children. Unfortunately, I don't have any answers in this case. Unless Nicholas shows up or he's found, there's not really anything I can tell you about what happened to him. I'm quite sure that there are really two options. He ran away. He was afraid of this upcoming court date that was the next day. He didn't want to be taken away from his house where he could essentially just do whatever he wanted and pretty much get away with it, because it really doesn't seem like anyone was punishing him for anything. Or he was abducted, or both. He could have run away and then gotten abducted as he was hitchhiking out of town or whatever. He clearly didn't have any money that anyone knew of, so I find that kind of odd. He didn't take anything with him. I find that also odd. When a child is planning to run away, they usually take something with them. I understand being scared. He didn't want to go to a juvenile group home. I get that. This Frederick guy is completely beyond me. I don't know if he just kind of got the idea in his head and was like, I'm gonna get to America, and then I don't know what I'm gonna do. You're pretending to be a kid who's 16 years old, so you have a little while before you can just be like, hey mom, who's not really my mom, I'm gonna get my own place. And do I think that someone in his family killed him and they were using Frederick to cover it up? Not necessarily. Stuff happens. Clearly, maybe he was being mouthy to his older brother and the older brother shoved him and he bumped his head or something. But I don't see necessarily not calling 911 and trying to cover it up as a solution. Now, I don't know these people. I'm not friends with them, so maybe that's what they did. I don't know. Unfortunately, everything I read was correct. We will not ever know what happened to Nicholas until he comes home or he's found. This was a long time ago, 1993. He was born in 1980. He's 40 years old. At this point, I feel like if he is out there just living his life somewhere, he potentially would have come home by now. So that kind of lends me to the fact that something really unfortunate happened to 13-year-old Nicholas Barclay. I have to wonder how long Frederick would have let the farce go on if that private investigator, Charlie Parker, had not taken it upon himself to investigate further. Would he have just continued to live with the Barclay family? Would he have eventually told video so that people hopefully